Am I the jerk for throwing a gift from my dad's wife in the trash before I moved out of their house? I, an 18-year-old male, moved out of my father's house last month, the day I turned 18. I no longer live in the same town, and instead I moved in with 3 of my friends who are starting college next month. I am about to start trade school. I am working until trade school starts to afford rent and food. The 4 of us are splitting the cost between us. I did not take money from my father. The day I left, my father's wife gave me a photo album saying it was a growing-up gift. This photo album contained photos of the 7 years since she and my father married. I did not appreciate the gift, nor did I want it, which I told her to her face. She told me to take it and said I should have family photos when I moved out. Before I left, I threw the album into the trash. When I was 10, my mother died. She had an allergic reaction while we were out for a celebratory dinner for my father, and she died on the way to the hospital. My mother was the glue that held us together. My father and I were never very close before she died. 6 weeks later, my father had already met his wife, and they boxed up all of my mother's things. These included her clothes, jewelry, photos, phone, keys, and anything that was just hers, and they brought it to the dump. I never got anything, and neither did any of her family. I was furious, and I will never forgive my father for what he did. The very next day, he moved that woman in. They were married 4 months later. They had a small but still formal wedding. They dragged me to it and pretended everything was fine and normal. She even gave a speech about being so excited to have a son of her own and all the adventures we'll have together. When I was 12, I got copies of a couple of photos of my mother from extended family and put them in my room. My father's wife found the photos and she removed them, saying I did not need those and I would bring everyone down having them in the house. I yelled at her, cursed at her, wished her dead and erased, and my father yelled at me for disrespecting his wife. I told him that day I wished he had died instead of my mother. He told me he wished he had let my grandparents take me after the fight they had about my mother's stuff going to the dump. I told him I wished he had. The 7 years of living with the 2 of them were hell. I am so glad I am gone. I have no respect for either of them, and I do not care that my father lost someone too. He threw her away, and not just from him. After I settled in my apartment, my father suddenly remembered my number for the first time in 3 years and called me out for upsetting and disrespecting his wife by throwing her gift away. He told me she did it out of love. I ignored it. She sent me a text on my father's phone telling me I should be surrounded by happy family memories, which was why she made the album. I sent a photo of my room, which has photos of my mother, ones I got copies of. That was the only reply I made, but I got several more texts, some from an unknown number after I blocked my father, saying I was acting spitefully. Am I the antagonist? Your actions don't make you a jerk. Your dad and his wife are deadbeats and should have never thrown away things that were rightfully yours. And this is definitely the winning post for most suspicious circumstances. Hope the coming years are filled with happiness. Am I the jerk for evicting my child and selling their home? In 2020, I bought my daughter Alexis's townhome that she was renting from someone else, that she had been living in since 2016. My daughter was having a tough time since her divorce, and the price was under market in August of 2020. I was naive about Alexis. She said she got treated unfairly in the divorce, even though she received alimony. Her ex moved out in March 2020, and she had a previous roommate that she said she hated from March to January. I bought the house during this time, but I could not legally evict that roommate due to COVID laws. I was happy when she moved out on her own. Next was Alexis's boyfriend. She refused to rent out the spare room with a bathroom and moved him in. He was a grifter and held various odd jobs like Instacart. He moved out in late 2023, and I operated the townhouse at a loss because they never matched me on rent to cover my mortgage. Next, there was this new girl, Amanda, who subleased from my daughter. This is for a room in a popular spot in California. Alexis said she was charging her $2,000, and Alexis was paying her part. I thought Amanda defaulted because that is what my daughter told me. I moved in with eviction paperwork as soon as I could legally do so. Amanda had a lawyer and showed me the receipts where she paid Alexis every month on time or earlier. I asked my daughter what was going on, and my daughter lied to me. It had been her not paying. At that moment, I realized Alexis was the problem. Amanda still moved out, and I have a pending lawsuit from her. I told Alexis that I am sick of owning this townhouse at a loss, and I am selling it before the housing bubble bursts. My daughter thinks I should give her the profit, and I told her she is the reason I am selling it. She has never paid rent. I told her I could legally evict her or she could move out on her own. My family thinks that I am the worst mother, and I have told everyone that Alexis has not only scammed me but other people. Alexis checked herself into rehab, trying to make it harder on me to evict her. Now I am determined, and my family is upset. Her father, divorced, cannot figure out how I can do this to her. You behaved properly. Alexis lied and potentially committed fraud, and now you're facing the consequences. It's fair to give her 2 choices. Leave quietly without legal repercussions or stay and face a lawsuit that will make her unemployable and unable to find housing. If any family members disagree, they are more than welcome to take her in themselves. Am I the jerk for using my veto on my wife's favorite name because it was my sister's birth name? My wife's #1 girl name is Josephine, with the nickname Josie Joy. She wanted it to be our daughter's name, telling me it felt just right for our girl. The name Josephine has a not-so-great history in my family. My biological parents fostered children and adopted some. My siblings, the children who were adopted, all had their own pasts. I have a sister who now has a different name, but she was named Josephine at the time of her birth. And it was her name until she was 6 when the name was changed before my parents legally adopted her. It was a very complicated process for my sister's name to be changed. There was a childhood psychologist, a trauma therapist, and a psychiatrist involved in stating that it was in her best interest for the name to be changed because of the trauma she had surrounding her name. For context, she was 5 when she was removed from her birth family and has memories of them using her name. They also called her Josie. My sister still has some trouble with the name, but she only hears it occasionally. She never tells people to use another name, but our family knows that it can trigger some memories for her and unpleasant feelings. She is still in therapy, but this isn't something that is hugely controlling her life. There's a difference between hearing it occasionally and hearing it all the time because someone in the family has that name. My wife knows it was my sister's name, but not everything about the trauma surrounding it. She knows it was bad enough for professionals to get involved to help her get the name formally changed, but she doesn't know the details I know about why. I also won't share it all here because that's my sister's story, not mine. So I told my wife that I was vetoing Josephine and Josie Joy. I told her it wasn't a name I could live with, knowing it would remind my sister of her trauma. I also had a very negative association because of my sister's past with it. My wife was disappointed and asked if we could talk to my sister about it first. I told her my sister would give us her blessing so she wouldn't burden us, but I would feel horrifically guilty. She said okay, and we have a short list of other names now. But she had talked about the name enough that her family was already calling our daughter Josephine. When my wife said Josephine wasn't the name, they asked why, and she told them a name should be agreed on by both, and we weren't on the same page, so we'd choose one we both loved equally. My wife's parents took me aside and asked me why I would deny my wife this name when it means so much to her. They said we could have worked on a middle name I loved. I told them the name had a bad history for me and I couldn't get past it. They told me I was being selfish. When I talked to my wife about it, she told me she wished I could have done more to try and make it work. But she'd talk to her parents and tell them to back off. Am I the antagonist? You handled things appropriately. It sounds like your wife was initially understanding until her family stirred things up, but names are a 2 yeses, 1 no situation, and that alone should have been the end of it. Forcing a name that causes trauma is incredibly cruel, and your in-laws are definitely in the wrong for pushing this. Your wife should tell her parents to stay out of it and find another name that doesn't bring up such painful memories. Am I the jerk for telling my parents they owe my husband a real and heartfelt apology if they ever wanted to be invited to anything? I, 27-year-old female, met my husband, Jamie, 27-year-old male, in high school. He had a bad reputation, not for things he did, but for things he didn't do, like going home or having an adult around him. His mother was an addict who didn't let him come home before midnight on any given night. As a result, he spent his time in different places, which made adults think poorly of him. People eventually realized that his situation was due to his mother's behavior, but they still judged him for her actions. My parents were among those judgmental people. They would see him out past dark and make comments. They were awful when Jamie and I started dating. I told them they considered themselves Christian and should be more understanding and welcoming of someone who didn't have a good home life. They claimed he wasn't trying, as if he could do anything about his mother. They judged him for not going to college, deeming him lazy, even though he had held a job since he was 14, and with the help of the couple he worked for, went to trade school. My parents were so terrible about it all that we didn't talk for a whole year. Then they reached out via my siblings to apologize to me and appeared to accept Jamie, realizing they had been wrong about him. Jamie always got along with my siblings. He started to get along with my parents too, which was nice. We got married 2 years ago and welcomed our first baby together in June. Last month, we had a big fight. My parents showed that they had kept their opinions to themselves for this long, but never saw Jamie as a good person. They always saw him as trash. It all started because Jamie was alone with the baby for an entire day, and they were horrified that I trusted him to watch our child without me there. They said such hateful things about Jamie that aren't true. He's an amazing dad and husband. He's not his mother. He has never been in trouble with the law. The fact they spoke about him like he was some criminal made me very upset. I kicked them out and told them I was done with them. We're still good with my siblings, which is where this post is taking us. We started talking about Christmas, and Jamie and I said we'd host them. My mom was trying to get my siblings to ask me if I'd come to Christmas dinner at their house with the baby. One sibling said Jamie and I were hosting. Upon learning that, my mom took said sibling's phone and called me, asking how I could leave them uninvited. I told her if they ever want to be invited to anything again, they need to truly reflect on their actions and words and make a real and heartfelt apology to Jamie. But that is the only way. It has to be real, and to him, not to me. I then hung up on my mom. My parents are now claiming I'm trying to blackmail them, which I don't think they truly understand. A text, which I assume is from my mom, accused me of being disrespectful to my parents and said that I can't demand an apology. Am I the jerk? Your actions were justified. Your parents clearly don't know their place, and it's horrible that they voice their opinion, that they don't think he's trustworthy enough to be left alone with his child. When you and your spouse married, you became one, so by insulting him, they are insulting you. Let them simmer for a while and hopefully, they will come around. But if they don't, trust me, the stress and anxiety over this aren't worth it. Am I the jerk for telling my family no more monthly family dinners? Ever since my father was a child, our family has had monthly family dinners, which were nicer than your average family dinner. We continued this tradition when my siblings and I were children. We would have our grandparents over, and we all enjoyed a nicer dinner together. When my siblings and I grew up, we still held these dinners. Instead of branches breaking off over time and forming their own gatherings, we decided to include partners, spouses, and our children as a whole group. By the time I was 19 years old, the family had decided to take turns hosting each month to lessen the burden. My wife was excited to be a part of these dinners at first. We started during our relationship. Initially, I did the cooking, and then she took over after a while because she wanted to. My family had seemingly got along with my wife before this point, but they were overly harsh about her cooking, with the exception of my 2 younger siblings. She tried to make them happy, but nothing worked. I told them they could be kinder. They said she should cook better or cook different things. My wife did not make anything they did not eat, but nothing was right. She grew frustrated and I grew suspicious. We hosted a couple of months ago and I told my wife we were going to pretend I did the cooking, just to see. She told me she felt like they just were not fond of her food. I pointed out that nobody had the same amount of complaints as they did, and they even criticized the steak and potatoes they all seemed to go crazy for. She went along with the plan. When my family thought I had cooked it, they loved it. They said it was so good that my wife had decided to let a real talent take over, that it was nice to have something a little different, curry, and all this very lovely stuff. My younger brother and sister were not fooled, but they enjoyed watching the rest of the family dig a hole. When the rest of my family heard it was my wife's food and not mine, they tried so hard to backtrack on all the nice things they had said. The rest of the dinner went in tense silence, and my wife saw the situation clearly. I told her I was done with these dinners, and she was my priority. She felt a little bad. I told her we could have dinners with my younger brother and sister sometimes. It is less stressful anyway. When we did not show up to last month's dinner or this one, my parents and siblings started asking questions. I told them each time that we were not going again. Missing 2 made it sink in. They told me we needed to be there. I said never again. My wife does not deserve their disrespect. I told them they ruined what they wanted by being harsh to her. They said I was overreacting, making very relationship-harming choices, and treating them badly for simply having issues with my wife's food. They also said to think of future children and how they will miss out. Some of it got to my wife a little, which I have tried to reassure her about. Am I the AE? You are not the one to blame. It sounds like your family dislikes your wife, not the cooking. Good for you for standing up to them and protecting your family. You really need to have a conversation with your family about why they are mean to your wife. This behavior needs to be addressed. Am I the jerk for not canceling plans to help my spouse drive my stepchild to college? My wife, a 41-year-old female, and I, a 43-year-old male, have been married for 6 years. We both have children from previous relationships. I have 2 sons, aged 14 and 12. I split custody with my ex-wife. My wife has 2 daughters, aged 18 and 15. She has primary custody of them because her ex-husband, who is in the military, is currently deployed in Europe. My oldest stepdaughter is going to college out of state this fall. My wife's ex-husband had hoped to come home to help move her to school, but that is not going to work. The weekend my stepdaughter is supposed to move in is the last extended time I will have with my sons before school starts again. I have planned a small camping trip for the 3 of us to get some good bonding in. When my wife's ex-husband told her he is not going to make it home to help with the move, my wife asked if I would be willing to come on the 7-hour drive to my stepdaughter's college. She does not feel comfortable making that drive by herself and does not have anyone else to ask. I reminded her that I am taking my sons camping that weekend. She suggested that we instead turn it into a family road trip. I told her that kind of defeats the purpose of the camping trip, which was to spend time with just my sons and to relax. Even if we find things to do on the drive, that's still just hours and hours spent in a car instead of doing what we had originally planned. My wife's argument is that I can always plan another camping trip with my sons, but my stepdaughter only moves away for college once. She said that since it is such a big life event for my stepdaughter, I should come to show that I support her because she feels bad her father cannot make it. I told her that I am not going to ask my sons to sacrifice something they have been looking forward to in exchange for making my stepdaughter feel better about her father missing out. I said that my sons are reaching an age where they probably are not going to want to spend weekends alone with their dad out in the woods much anymore, and I want to take advantage of that while I still can. My wife got upset with me and told me that I am playing favorites with my kids over hers. I told her that it is not my fault her ex-husband cannot make it, and if she wants to be mad at someone, she can complain to the US military. She told me she knows it is not my fault, but I am in a position to help be a father figure when my stepdaughter needs one. She asked if I would at least talk to my sons about the road trip idea, but I told her I will not do that. I suggested she ask a friend to come with her, but she said that is not the point. To her, the point is that since her ex-husband cannot make it, I am next in line as a father figure to help my stepdaughter with this transition. I do feel bad that her father cannot make it, but that's out of my control and I do not want to sacrifice quality time with my sons for this. You handled things appropriately. It's perfectly reasonable for each parent to follow through with their planned trips with their kids. The wife has plenty of options besides canceling the camping trip, like breaking up the drive over 2 days or renting a car and flying back. Plus, this could be a great bonding experience for her and her daughter while moving into college. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.